Welcome. Good evening, everyone. I'm Roberta with iPlanGroup, and we are going to be talking about Airbnb and your IRA. It's a great topic. There's a lot of interest and excitement, of course, around Airbnb and the real estate space. Of course, we've seen a lot of change in 2020 as well as 2021, and we do see Airbnb as a real estate investment. Some of our current clients are doing that, and we're going to be talking with Bernie Cesario. Did I say that right, Bernie?
Yep.
Okay, great. And Todd Ingram. And we met at a local real estate event, actually. I think we've crossed paths in the past, but recently at the Greater Cleveland Real Estate Investment Association here in Cleveland, Ohio. They were on a panel and just talking about Airbnb here locally and in some surrounding states, and it was dynamic. There was a lot of people in the room. You got people out, which was great to see. And we decided to go ahead and put this event together to specifically talk about this opportunity in Airbnb investing and with your IRA, because your IRA definitely can be involved with this real estate business model, but there's some things to know about that. So as you are hopping on the call, I just want you to know that this is going to be and is being recorded. And we're going to share that, of course, with you, those of you that have registered for the event. And you will be able to share this, of course, with your friends, family, fellow investors, and others. So as soon as you register, we will get that video to you so you can listen again at your leisure. If you do have questions, please do put them in the Q&A. I will cover those throughout the presentation today. And the chat's a great place just to share with us comments. So maybe the state that you're in, where you're calling from, maybe if you are currently an Airbnb investor, that's very helpful for us to know as well. And again, the questions can go in that Q&A, just makes it a little bit easier to separate that out. So I will go ahead and officially start. If you are joining in, again, welcome. I am Roberta with iPlanGroup. We are located in Westlake, Ohio, which is in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio. And we are a self-directed IRA administrator with the custodial responsibility for our clients that are investing with their IRAs, Roth, traditional, and others. And they are investing in alternative investments, including real estate, private notes, and private entities. There's a lot of things you can do with a self-directed IRA. We do have a national reach. And again, we welcome you. Thanks for joining. Those of you that are new to our events, welcome especially. And I just want to let you know we're going to talk and present for probably about 30 minutes, but we like to keep it active. So I will take a look at the Q&A and answer those as we go along. If we don't address your question, of course, about 30 minutes in, we're going to cover those additional questions as well. So Airbnb is the topic tonight, and the IRA, and actually do these two things mix? And I will tell you they do, and we'll explain how. A lot of people are asking right now with maybe just the downturn with the moratorium on I always go to say that. You guys can help me with it. It's the landlord or the leasing rent moratorium, right? Part of the CARES Act. So there's been some loss of income for some people, and they're like, hey, can I take this real estate property and possibly convert it into an Airbnb? So it's a great question, and it's one that I know Bernie and Todd have definitely explored, and they're active in doing that conversion. But I want to cover, before we dive into a lot of the content, that of course we're here for educational purposes only. We don't give you any tax, legal, or investment advice. We are strictly here for educational purposes. We are regulated. iPlanGroup is regulated by the IRS and the Department of Labor. We do review investments on behalf of our clients for feasibility, not for performance purposes. So it's very important that you do the due diligence in any investment that you make sure that you're comfortable with that investment, and retain those advisors, CPAs, real estate attorneys, and others to be sure that you're comfortable with that investment. And of course, with any investment comes risk. So education is what can help you make those choices, right? And reduce some of that risk. So self-directed IRA administrator, I covered that. We are helping our clients every day, really empowering them to make investments in investments that they're comfortable with and do it tax advantage. They're growing wealth, retirement savings, and they're doing it through a very powerful tool called the self-directed IRA. And we provide education like this. You can always go to iPlanGroup.com, look at our events page. If you've engaged with us here via email originally with an invite, you will be seeing invitations to other events as well. A little bit about iPlanGroup, what makes us distinctly different from our competition? Well, this is pretty much it. We are founded by investors for investors, and Jill Banner, our owner and CEO, is a very accomplished investor herself. She's done everything from mobile home parks, land, auctions, tax liens, deeds, angel investing, startup companies, you name it, she's done it. And as an investor, a self-directed IRA investor with a very large custodian, she became frustrated basically because she just couldn't get people to answer the phone or expedite those investments. And in an auction situation, that can be very challenging. And of course, if you have to file extensions when you're making offers, that's going to cost you money as well. So got frustrated, long story short, started iPlanGroup, decided to do it better, and we have been doing it better. We are in our 9th year, and we've been growing consistently year after year. So that's our background. This mindset is throughout our company. Our internal culture definitely reflects this mindset, and it shows up in our personal client experience, as well as same-day processing and understanding you, the investor, urgency behind the things that you're doing. To clarify our conversation, self-directed, it's important to clarify because you hear it a lot. You could hear it as a marketing term. So some people will say to me, Roberta, I've got a self-directed IRA. It's over at Schwab, and I've got some real estate in it. That's not what we're talking about in this conversation. It is self-directed, meaning that asset is titled directly in the IRA. It's not in your name personally. It's not traded on the stock market per se. It is in your IRA. So it is really no different than an IRA that you would hold right now, Roth, traditional, or small business plan. It is the same in terms of those contribution limits and the distribution rules and all the tax benefits around it. So self-directed, just meaning you've moved a portion of your account or an entire account, totally up to you at iPlanGroup, no minimum balances here, but you move that over and now you can self-direct. So that's what we do. That's our wheelhouse. That's what we specialize in. And we take on that unique custodial responsibility. It's a little more clunky than a ETF, but you can definitely do it. If you do traditional stocks, bonds, mutual funds, I want you to know you could do that here as well. It's a one-on-one conversation, but we have a pretty seamless platform with TD Ameritrade. So if you've got some uninvested cash, you can go ahead and move that over to TD Ameritrade and then bring it on back to do real estate or that Airbnb if you choose. So I just want to mention that. If I could summarize a Roth IRA, or I should say the power of a self-directed IRA, this is the slide that really demonstrates why people are doing it and how powerful it is. The power of Roth with compounding interest. And of course, as an investor, that compounding interest could be substantially higher than maybe just a 7 to 14%, I don't know, 6%, whatever you're experiencing. Some investors in a single deal will see much higher returns, as you know. But if you're using a Roth IRA, in this example, let's say you're starting at the age of 40 and your starting balance is $100,000. And you're not making any contributions, but you are growing your investment, in this example, 10%. Now, your marginal tax rate might be much higher than 25% or lower, depending on how you file your taxes. But in this example, again, 25%, 10% expected rate of return, and that's over 25 years. Now, inside of a Roth IRA, the difference is you're growing that wealth tax-free. So what are you doing? You're taking out that net effective tax rate of 25% and you're getting the power of zero, absence of taxation. And your savings in this example, over $600,000. So that is why people call us. That's why people join this education, because they want to figure out what investment can I actually do what are the funds that I actually have that I can begin to self-direct, because you want to get this working for you if you can. Tax advantage choices is what we talk about with self-directed IRAs. It's really about when you're paying taxes, not if. Now, some people say it is an if, good for you. But most of people are saying when. So is it when I have a little bit of money on that seed, or after I grow that money inside of my IRA on the exit, right? So a required minimum distribution is involved with a traditional IRA. So required minimum distribution at age 72. If you've got $1 million, $2 million, whatever that is at that time, 10% of $100,000 is a lot lower than 10% of $2 million. So you definitely want to be thinking about that. A self-directed IRA is not ideal for every investment, but it is ideal for many investments. So it's your job to explore that and to figure out where you can actually get that Roth working for you. So this is where we remind everybody to be sure to strategize, strategize with your team, your CPAs, real estate attorneys, fellow investors, what I call running with the winners, people that are winning in the space that you want to win. You definitely want to learn from them, get that information, do the due diligence. There's things right now that are happening. Of course, we try to participate in current events and keep you abreast of what is going on in terms of legislation. We saw the Secure Act earlier 2 years ago coming into play, the CARES Act in 2020. That is expiring. So that moratorium that we talked about, expiring even on forbearances. So people that receive forbearances in their loans, real estate loans, some of those people aren't going to be able to qualify for a loan. So we're going to see changes in real estate opportunities is what I'm speaking about. Peter Thiel's been in the news, right? And that's been a big topic for those of you that know what I'm talking about. Yes, over like $5 billion is not in his IRA. But I want you to know that with this proposed tax legislation coming up, this opportunity could be closing in. It's not just for the rich. I just want you to know that. It's for you and me. Well, maybe you're rich, but it's for all of us. So regardless of the amount that we have in a traditional IRA, for example, we might want to convert that into a Roth IRA. We talk about that. So you can get into a Roth because maybe you make too much money to have a Roth. So you can convert traditional funds into a Roth IRA. So if you're thinking about that, this is the time that may go away in 2022. So be sure to just kind of do some research, Google it, learn about it, and then talk to your advisors and make sure that you are taking advantage of any opportunity with a self-directed IRA so you can kind of get grandfathered in there and take advantage of these Roth tax-free earnings that I just mentioned to you. So what are we seeing? The trends 2021 going into 2022? Yep, Roth conversions, definitely seeing a lot more of that. More people doing multiple IRAs. So traditional Roth, maybe even a solo 401k or other accounts, health savings accounts. I'm not going to talk about that tonight, but those are powerful. HSAs, they can be self-directed and you can grow that income tax deferred and tax free on the way out when you're paying for qualified medical expenses. And yes, your HSA can own a portion of an Airbnb or a self-storage, whatever it is that you do. So definitely be looking at that. Cryptocurrency, yep, lots of buzz around that as well. You can do that in an IRA, private lending, better yield. And that kind of sets us up for what we're going to be talking about too with Todd and Bernie, better yield and ways to do that. I'm going to touch on prohibited transactions just briefly because this is important when you consider an Airbnb property for yourself. There is some hands-on work with Airbnbs. So property management comes into play, the cleaning, all of that. So there's things that are prohibited to your IRA, and one of those things is you. So we'll talk a little bit about those prohibited persons, but actually there's very few assets that are prohibited to your IRA. So some of those would be life insurance, collectibles, S corporations. So there's certain things that are prohibited and things that you see here on the screen. So if you're going to invest in that wine collection, you can't hold that in your IRAs. So definitely check that IRS code, and that's in section 4975, where you can reference what is prohibited in your IRA. But that disqualified person is what I want you to be thinking about in this discussion today. So you're disqualified, meaning sweat equity or self-dealing. And that includes your spouse, that includes grandparents, parents, your children, their spouses, or grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren. And what does that mean? So you have an Airbnb inside of your IRA, for example, your grandkids can't stay in it. Can you go in and take the sheets off the bed and launder them and do all of that? No, you cannot. That is considered sweat equity. But I always remind people at this point, make sure that you put on that investor hat, right? Put that on and say, I want to be an investor. I don't want to be a cleaning person per se, right? I don't want to be physically improving my property. So you can do paperwork, but not the sweat work. You can also use an unrelated third party to do the property management, which is great to know. Now, your sister, brother, or nieces, nephews, cousins, they are not prohibited. So that horizontal family tree is open to you. So that is important to keep in mind as we get into the stuff you really want to hear about, the Airbnb. So with a self-directed IRA, not sriracha, what can you do? You can, here's the options I want you to be thinking about as I introduce Todd and Bernie. If you have real estate in your IRA right now, and maybe it's underperforming, or maybe it's performing, but you want it to perform a little bit better, you can actually take that real estate and convert that buy and hold, for example, into an Airbnb. That's possible for you. And we can talk about those details. You can also acquire property in your IRA. So let's say you hold a self-directed IRA right now, and you want to acquire real estate. You're currently looking for real estate. Maybe that's distressed property. Again, I think some opportunity is going to be seen again in that area, considering some of the numbers that are already currently in forbearance. I know that's an interesting number, not the topic tonight, but I know that's going on nationally. So you can acquire that property and you can make it an Airbnb as opposed to this single family rental. Now, if you don't have a self-directed IRA and you do not have any real estate in your IRA, you can always establish a self-directed IRA account. And that's where I come in, and you can reach out to me directly. We can talk about it, but you can roll over. This is a way to fund it. You can roll over a former 401k plan from a former employer. That includes pensions, TSPs, 403bs, many different options there, and fund a self-directed IRA and then make that offer and get that Airbnb going. You can also transfer from an existing IRA. So Roth to Roth, traditional to traditional, can be a portion of an account again, or an entire account. And then that way you have a non-taxable event and you're ready to go to acquire that real estate. And you can also contribute to a self-directed IRA. Now, if you have no IRAs and your contribution limit, let's say for an example, is $6,000 in a Roth IRA, you may be thinking, I don't know how I can do that. Well, I want you to know contributions are very powerful, and it's always better to get started, but you can do a contribution and get a self-directed IRA. But if you qualify for small business plans, again, one-on-one conversation, this might be a great way to get started with your Airbnb business if you qualify much higher contribution limits on those particular accounts. If you qualify for a solo 401k, potentially $58,000 or $64,500 contribution limit if you're age 50 and over. So that is something I want you to be thinking about. And now we're going to dive into, I know what you're most interested in is really how does this Airbnb work? Tell me about the success out there and how I can get involved. So I am formally introducing to you Bernie and Todd, and BidCo Homes and Ingram Property Management is their forte, their business. And I want to just go ahead and turn it over to you. Welcome, and tell us where you are calling from as well, Bernie and Todd.
Hi, Roberta. Thanks for having us on, first of all. I'm in Medina, Ohio, and we work mostly in the Cleveland area, but we service other areas outside, but I'm based out of Medina, Ohio. So thanks for having us on, and I'll let Todd introduce himself, and he'll get us kicked off.
Okay, thank you, Bernie and Roberta. Appreciate again you inviting us and having us on. I currently also live in Northeast Ohio. I am in Akron. I have also lived in Medina and all around the country as well, in Georgia, New Jersey, California, and have relatives all over. But as Bernie said, currently the properties we've been focusing on are here in the Northeast Ohio area, but we'll touch on this later. Because of the systems that we work with and have in place, we can work with properties anywhere within the United States and possibly even outside the US as well.
Great. Well, it sounds like you've probably been staying in quite a few Airbnbs as well. I'm just going to add real quickly, we do have some listeners from a suburb of Chicago, not involved in Airbnbs yet. Tannersville, PA, building out some STRs in the Poconos. That sounds pretty cool.
Tony, I know Tony. Thanks for joining us, Tony.
Excellent. Okay. And we also have a question. Do cities have ordinance restrictions on Airbnbs? Yes, they do. And we have some, we'll be able to answer some of those questions. And then Steve is here to hear about Airbnb. Oh, we know all this. I'm not sure if that's just a fun comment or not. So, okay, awesome. I appreciate those comments. And go ahead.
Okay, do you want to go to our next slide on there, Roberta? Perfect. So let's touch on a little bit about what is Airbnb and what isn't. I noticed as Roberta was looking at some of the folks that joined us, someone mentioned that STR. Well, what is STR? That's short-term rental. That is kind of the technical term within the industry, but the general term, sort of like the Xerox or the Kleenex of the industry, is Airbnb, and that's the name that most folks go by, so that's why we're using that term. But a couple of things. Why would you consider short-term rental versus long-term rental? If, let's say, you already happen to own a long-term rental property, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. It's a great investment. Actually, Bernie and I talk about this all the time, and we like to include the long-term rentals as part of our portfolios as well. And when we look for properties to purchase, not only do we consider would they do well as a short-term rental or an Airbnb, but could they also work well as a long-term rental? And one of the reasons for that is, as one of the questions that came up, what about city ordinances? And you never know when a law might change. And if you're investing in real estate, multiple exit strategies are often a very good idea. So if for some reason you're not able to operate as an Airbnb, can you fall back on making it a long-term rental? And we can also talk about midterm rentals as well, which is certainly a thing. So what are some of the benefits? Short-term rentals make at least 2 times the standard rental of an area. So if you're making $1,000 a month on a long-term rental, the minimum you should expect on turning it into a short-term is $2,000 a month. And what we've seen is many times it's 3 times the revenue or even more. So we can often turn that $1,000 a month rental into $3,000, or the $2,000 a month rental into $6,000 a month, which is often very attractive, right? We're into this to make money. We're investors. So why not maximize that if possible? What's another difference? Well, because it's a short-term rental, you don't have someone living there for a whole year or multiple years. Someone might be coming for just 2 or 3 days or 7 days or maybe a month if it's a visiting nurse or someone of that sort. But one of the benefits for the owner of the property is that the property gets more attention. It's not, let's rent it to someone for a year and we don't look at it for a year, and then we come back and there's a lot of damage and there's things that have to be repaired before we can rent it to someone else for another year. We are constantly monitoring that property. It gets professionally cleaned in between every stay. So if a guest comes in for 2 days and you have another coming in for 3, we manage cleaners that come in and do what we call a turnover of the property. Everything gets inspected, everything gets cleaned, and we're not talking just a general clean. This is a hospitality clean. Every single surface is touched, disinfected, especially with what we're dealing with now with COVID. We make sure that everything is completely safe. And so the property is actually cared for in a much more hands-on and careful way than what you might see in a long-term rental. And so those are just some of the differences, and we're into it. So we certainly think there's some huge benefits in why you might want to take a look at doing short-term rentals. If you have any experience with long-term, the revenue potential is dramatically higher.
And so I'll talk a little bit about the market statistics. So we're gonna just talking about like the Cleveland market, right? Because that's the market that we're dealing with, even though we have people from other parts of the of the country. We can go to the next slide, Roberta. So in Cleveland, the average occupancy rate is about 57% on a Airbnb short-term rental, and the average daily rate is about 132, and about $132 a night. And if you go to the next slide, that kind of equates to about $36,000 a year for an average 3-bedroom home on Airbnb in our area. And in the Cleveland area, a 3-bedroom home would be around $1,000 to $1,200 a month in regular long-term rentals. So you can see where that 3x income is coming in. And just to give you an idea, there's about 1,295 Airbnbs in Cleveland right now, and that number fluctuates quite a bit. It goes down, it goes up all the time because people add properties on, people take properties off. But some cities, have like 3, 4, 5,000. Cleveland's a medium-sized city, but some cities have quite a bit more. And when you compare that to hotel rooms, it's actually still very low. We're building up there, but in Cleveland they have well over 5,000 hotel rooms, so we're not even anywhere near that. And go next slide, Todd.
Okay, great. So yeah, the question is, what do? We do mostly a model that's called co-hosting, which means that we work with the owners of the properties. They own them and we manage them. We call it co-hosting because we do work with the owners, but really it is, and what makes this perfect for investment within an IRA is that we completely handle everything for the owner of the property, from booking the property to managing the guests to getting the cleaning done. And if there were any issues that came up, we handle getting handyman in there to fix any repairs or anything that has to be handled. That is what we do. Now, in order to start the process, if someone has a long-term rental and they want to consider short-term rentals are done with properties that are furnished. So what we first need to do is work with that owner, and then we talk about how can we build this out to be a nice short-term rental or Airbnb property. And then we put together a list. We buy all the furnishings. There's some electronics that are involved because we have electronic door locks that we use to control access to the property. So basically, we first build out the property. And then once the property is built out, we work with the Airbnb and a couple of other formats that do the marketing for us or help us do the marketing to the guests. And we put together the listings on there, take the pictures. We get professional pictures done, so everything looks beautiful, and we market that. And then once guests start coming in, we handle the guests from A to Z. So that is generally what we do. One thing we also do, because we are real estate investors ourselves, is if you do not have a property, but you'd like to get into one, there are times that we can help find properties on the market and work with you hand in hand to not only manage your current properties, but help you find some that we can help you then, get involved with inside your IRA. And then if you'd like us to help manage those, we can certainly do that. One thing I do want to message here to you as well is we're more than happy to help you. So if you just would like to run your own Airbnb and you have some questions, we'd be more than happy to be a resource for you. You'll have some contact information here toward the end of the presentation. And if you want to do this yourself, we are more than happy to tell you, here's what you need to do, here's the process, and so on and so forth, if you'd like to go about doing this yourself and bringing in a property. Now, keep in mind, of course, as Roberta said, if you want to run an investment like this yourself, it's not a great fit for having it inside your IRA because it has to be hands off. But if maybe you have some investment money outside the IRA and you also want to do some inside, we can work with you in both ways. Okay.
Excellent. Quick question for you. Earlier on one of your slides, you also talked about asset protection, kind of a different level, I think you said. Do you want to just comment on that?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So, there's a couple of things there. We're approaching that from a couple of spaces. One is that we have hands-on more often. So we are seeing the property. We communicate with our cleaners constantly. And one of our rules is if you see anything damaged or that looks anything different than when you last saw the property, please tell us because we get that fixed right away. In order to create the revenue for our clients, we have to have the properties in as close to perfect shape as possible. So there's no delay in getting things protected. So there's that extra layer of protection. In addition, there are insurances available specifically for short-term rentals. And sometimes this is a question or a concern that someone getting into this space has is, oh no, someone's going to have parties at my house and they're going to destroy the place. Well, let me talk about that. First of all, there's insurance for that. Secondly, the host site, specifically Airbnb, has a process for this. If there's something damaged and we catch that right away with our cleaners, which we do, we can submit that information to Airbnb and they reimburse us for the repair. So, that is part of the contract that a guest signs when they book through Airbnb, is that they're going to take care of the property. So that gives another layer of protection as well. So, we did want to talk about that.
Okay, great. We do have some questions coming in. I just want to address one real quickly before you go into the technology piece. Off-market properties, are you exploring that?
So we've looked at a couple of off-market properties, and there's a couple of resources from that. Being investors ourselves, we're like locally, we're hooked up with a lot of wholesalers. So the wholesalers are often bringing us properties saying, would this make a good Airbnb? Do you have someone that would be good for this property? So we do look at that. The other thing that happens a lot is Airbnbs often switch hands. So one Airbnb owner will want to sell that property and sell it to somebody else who wants to manage an Airbnb. Actually, like just this month alone, I'm involved in 2 such transactions. And sometimes owners want to move on to something different. Like one of my owners currently just sold a property that's doing very well. So it boosted the value of the property because of how much it was making on Airbnb. And he wanted to sell that home and buy something that's more of a traditional vacation home. So he's buying a vacation home with the money that he sold on his regular home. So it gives us the benefit because we can work with the new owner of the Airbnb, and the old owner, he's buying a bigger, nicer house for us to manage. Another one that we were involved in is a strictly investor to investor property where somebody had a property here in the Cleveland area, and they sold it to an out-of-state investor as a running performing asset. So that was a really good way. So the investor never saw the property, just saw pictures of it, made it up nice, easy transactions, and it's delivering money, from day one. So that's kind of the off market that we're dealing with.
Okay. So actually getting properties that maybe aren't performing as well, getting them up to snuff, the ability to sell them, and then also obviously networking, right, with investors, just like you would other properties, but it's kind of a niche, right? So people that are looking for that. So that makes sense. A lot of questions are coming in through the chat, so they're a little harder to monitor. So as I check them off, it's easier in the Q&A. So if you, I will cover those in the chat. So I see a couple questions. Scott, Dave, be right with you on that. I did want to ask also before we proceed, we had an earlier question. One of our listeners, Marie, said that she's heard about the Airbnb, something about allowing refugees to book properties indefinitely. I don't know. And I don't know if you can speak to anything like that.
I have not heard of that, but what I will tell you is the Airbnb process, the way it works is that for one, when somebody books on Airbnb puts a hold for that entire amount of money for the visit on the credit card. So if the visit is going to be $1,200, then they put a $1,200 hold on the credit card for that visit. We get that money transferred into our account on day one of the visit. So if it's going to be a $1,200 visit for 6 days, then the day that the guest moves in, we get a $1,200 transfer. So I'm not sure how a refugee would be able to do something indefinite, because the reservation definitely has to have a start and end date, and it has to be paid in full for that start and end date. And with Airbnb and also VRBO and the other platforms that we work on also, the only thing where you don't get the full payment is if it's over a 30-day period. Like if somebody does like a 2-month booking, then you get the first 30 days on the day they move in, and then at the end of the 30 days, you get the second 30 days.
Okay.
So, but it's always prepaid to us. We haven't had any situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this would tie into the other question on the same topic about squatters. So with rentals and the moratorium that we saw on paying rent, squatters was an issue, right? So
Right.
do you feel that that's the same issue with Airbnb or more controllable? Is that what I'm hearing?
So it's definitely more controllable, and I won't say that it doesn't exist, because I have heard of people renting Airbnbs and then squatting. Luckily, it hasn't happened to us. We've had somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 guest stays in the last couple of years, and we haven't had any of that kind of issue. There's a couple things that help with the squatter type situation. First of all, the laws that regulate your guest as opposed to a tenant are different for a short-term guest as opposed to a long-term guest.
Okay.
A squatter would be somebody like if somebody checked into a hotel room and the hotel room, they have the hotel room for 2-3 days and then they don't want to leave. Technically, the hotel can call the police and have that person removed. So we're the same kind of a thing, right? If they have a 3-day booking and then they don't want to leave, we can call the police and have them removed because we have a booking after that. If somebody has a booking for over 30 days, it actually makes the squatter situation more possible, right? Because now you don't fall in the super short-term rental. So like the under 30 days, you can definitely call police and have them removed. Over 30 days, it goes into another category. But it's, those stories sell news, so you hear about it, but I have not seen it. I have no personal experience with any squatters, and we've had quite a few. We've had a lot of guests that stayed over 30 days, so it's not unusual to have an over 30-day scale.
And you can always opt not to have a 30-day rental, I would imagine.
Right.
You can always-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, let me touch on that real quick. Couple things.
Sure.
We're in a quite a landlord-friendly state in this regard, and there's different state regulations. There's some other states, I won't mention them. I'm definitely not a lawyer or an expert, but there's some other states that are less landlord-friendly. And I know, especially in those types of states, some of the rules that short-term rental managers use are that they limit their stays to less than 30 days for just that reason. And if it's a bit inconvenient, possibly for the guest, but if they have someone that wants to do it for longer than that, they sometimes have to move out for a day and then come back, find a place to stay for a day. And then it's it's 29 days at a time and that sort of thing, really just to avoid that type of situation. But as Bernie mentioned, in our area, it's very landlord friendly. If someone does not do what they said they would do in their contract, we can have them removed if we need to with the help of the police. And the way we have things set up with the electronic locks works really well as well, because they don't have keys or any way to get back in. Once they're removed, we can set the locks to not allow that code that they use to get in anymore. And we have excellent control over that.
I'm sure a lot of investors would be very happy to hear that.
Yeah.
For sure. Can you find turnkey properties in Ohio? Do you do turnkey in Ohio?
Yeah, so those the two I was talking about before. One of them, is from wholesalers. We're tied into the wholesale network, so we do find a lot of properties that way. And the other one, just being in the Airbnb network with investors, we're part of a group. There's and actually in the next slide, I was going to introduce our chief advisor, Mike. He has a mastermind where there's organizations like ours. There's about 250 of them, and altogether we manage almost 2,000 properties, and that's where I know Tony from. Tony is in that group. So we network a lot within that group, and we have had properties exchange hands just within that group, where somebody wants to get into another state. Like, for example, I have a lot of Ohio investors that want to invest in Florida. So a lot of times we'll send people down there, and the Florida properties are often owned by people all over the place. So, when somebody wants to leave the market, and then we bring somebody else in on it. So those are the kind of off-market deals that we get in Ohio. And like I said, I've been involved in 2 just in this month alone. So there's definitely plenty there.
That's exciting. So why don't we go forward, and then we have quite a few questions also in the chat and the Q&A, but I'd like you to go forward because I think the technology piece too is going to help answer some of the questions, and also what you do and the level of service, that you're capable of.
So introducing my team. So besides Todd and myself, my wife is director of guest experience. We have Mike, he's our chief advisor. But then I also have a customer service team that manages a lot of the communication, the guest communications, a lot of the behind the scenes stuff with the locks, making sure people get in, making sure people get out, making sure the units are clean between people, working with the cleaners to make sure the cleaners are well supplied and they don't have any interim issues in the cleaning for the visit. We also have a team of handymen, and these are not employees, you know, they're 1099 contractors, the cleaners, the handymen, the repair guys. So that's basically our team, and it takes a lot of people to get everything going, but everybody specializes in different parts, so it works out real well. And if you go to the next slide, Todd's going to talk a little bit about some of the electronic tools that we use.
Right. So thank you. This page is basically what I would call our internal software. So this is going to be your management facing software. AirDNA is a fantastic software to help us evaluate properties when we're looking to possibly get into a new property to purchase, or maybe even do a rental arbitrage or something of that nature. It helps us to estimate what the potential revenue could be for a property of a certain size in a certain area of the country. So Noise Aware is a fantastic software that was developed specifically for this purpose, and it really makes owners feel good about that concern that there might be a big party or something that might destroy their property. What Noise Aware does is it measures a decibel level in a property, and it connects into an outlet and then gets screwed in so that it can't be easily removed. And it just lets you know if the noise level gets above a certain level, and if it does, it alerts us and allows us to manage that. We can, if that happens, usually just a phone call that says, okay, it's beyond our quiet hours. And a neighbor called and mentioned it was a little noisy over there. Could you help us out and, quiet it down? And if it goes beyond that, then we can get involved if it turns into a true party or something like that, but helps us be aware. So Turnover B&B is what we use to manage and hire cleaners. So it helps us find them. Although once we have some that are doing a great job, we try to reuse those same cleaners over and over because they get used to the properties and we get used to them and it works better. But it also helps us to manage them, see what they've done, and make sure that everything is going the way that we want it to go. Price Labs is a software that helps us to maximize pricing. It's a dynamic pricing tool because things are not the same price. If you're having a big event in town, let's say the Republican convention's coming to Cleveland, when that's happening, you want your prices to go up, but maybe you don't know exactly how much. Well, that tool helps us to maximize our revenue by raising prices when demand is rising and we know it's going to, or there's expectation of that, and lower prices to get bookings and still continue revenue and minimize empty stays. And then Guesty is a software that ties it all together. And one of the big benefits of Guesty is that if we have multiple booking platforms like Vrbo and Airbnb, we want to make sure that we don't get double bookings. And Guesty helps us manage our calendar so that once it gets booked on one of those platforms, it blocks it out so they can't get a double book from another platform. And there's a number of other tools within Guesty that helps us to manage all the properties. All right, so we'll look at the next one. So these are other softwares that we use, but these are what I would call guest-facing software. So generally, these are marketing pieces of software that guests are going to use to find us and to evaluate our properties and to book those properties. So at this point, we're using mostly Airbnb and Vrbo. Vrbo being part of the HomeAway portion of software. But there are a couple other ones on here that we haven't decided to use at this point based on a number of reasons. But in certain areas, if we get properties in other areas, we'll definitely bring some others on. Certain softwares are stronger for booking in different areas. So yeah, those are the different pieces of software we like to use. So do we have any questions around software, Roberta, that we want to bring in now?
Let me go through some of this now. So this is tying into that. A question about Airbnb calling the shots. It's their own company. So if they can cover the payments, which in turn they would get it as a write-off, I assume. I don't see why not go that way. I'm not sure.
So I'm not sure if this question is being asked about booking it yourself versus using a service to help you book it. So
I think
Airbnb would be a marketing service. and they have the eyes and ears, if you will, of millions of people, and they spend millions in advertising to get their name and marketing out there, which is why we use them. Now, can you book without them? Absolutely. You can have your own website, you can list properties, and you can book that way. And we're building that as we go. And one of the nice things about, if you do a good job of keeping track of your clients and guests, you can rebook them over and over. And we gather emails and data from the people that book with us. And then we reach out to those folks to try to get them to rebook. But that process of trying to book properties on your own without the help of these services is something that has to happen over time. It's very difficult to do that immediately out of the gate. What's going to happen is someone that tries to do that is going to end up with a very low booking percentage and is going to leave a lot of money on the table at first. So it's definitely worth using these services in the long run. I think it definitely is, but at first, for sure.
Okay, and that question did come a little bit earlier in our presentation when we were talking about the refugees. So
Okay.
yeah, so that helped. Thank you for clarifying on that, Igor.
Sure.
Do you provide services in all states or just in your state only? And of course, all states, but is it all states? Do you want to comment on that?
I will. So definitely we will look at that right now, to be transparent. Our only properties we manage are in Ohio. But are we open to other states? Absolutely. I'm having conversation right now with someone in Pennsylvania. And one of the things, it can be challenging to manage a single Airbnb that is distant from you. If you have a single one that's very close to you, it's not too difficult to manage it. But a single one in a far off location can be a challenge. It is better to have 5 or 6 in an area to be able to maximize the benefits of using some of the tools and the same cleaners and the same handymen. And as you can imagine, building that team. And so once you start getting into other areas, you need to have other teams. And if you have a cleaner that's only cleaning one property, you're sharing that cleaner with other teams or other people that are doing the same thing, and it could become a challenge booking them. So the answer is yes, we do that. We're definitely open to it. But I would say we're even more open to it if someone's able to help bring, let's say, 6 properties to the table or so, because that helps us to immediately build a team that can manage all of those. So we will do it, but it's easier with a little more property.
Sure. And it sounds like, because we do have some questions on your fees, but of course I, want people to reach out to you and talk about that individually. But it sounds like if you had new opportunities with multiple properties, like you just described, you probably would do some custom, pricing or services, I would imagine, on that.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And we do customize things with individuals. We have a way we do things, of course. And we talked about the 2X and the 3X. If you're doing a mediocre job running an Airbnb, you can 2X. That's kind of a bottom line. If you're in the business and you're not doing a terrible job, you can probably get twice the revenue of someone that's doing a long-term rental. Well, we're not satisfied with that. We want to do an excellent job. And so our goal is 3X or more. Part of that is that we have a certain minimum level of quality on the products that we'll put into a property. Now, so we like to look at a property and recommend certain quality level, because you can put low-end products, furniture and that sort of thing, dishes, silverware into a property, but people notice that when they go and they stay there. They notice if a property has, beautiful decorations and plants and pictures on the wall and these sorts of things, and they're going to be more likely to want to come and rebook and pay a higher rate to do that. And that's what we're here to do as professionals in the industry, is to help the owners of our properties maximize that. So we do have some areas where we don't really budge on that sort of thing. If somebody's thinks that they know how to do it better than us, that's awesome, fantastic. Go ahead and handle it. But when you do work with us, we do have some areas where we don't do it your way, if so to speak. We really need to do it our way, because we're trying to make money for you. And if you want to make that money, we know it needs to be done this way. So.
And I'll add to that, so even, for those managing themselves, the high touch areas are really, really important, like the towels and the sheets. Those are very high touch areas, and it's going to be very close to them, and it's going to directly impact their comfort of their stay. So we definitely don't want cheap towels that are scratchy. We definitely don't want cheap sheets. We definitely want good mattresses. So those are like 3 really, really focus areas that we look at. And a lot of times when we take over running Airbnbs, that's the first things that we change out. Because you just, especially the first night, people are traveling, they're weary, they just want to lay their heads down on the pillow, and you don't want to scratch your pillow when you lay your head down.
Well, I just have to interject because you talked so much about that. So I was in a Airbnb in Michigan. It was the Ann Arbor area, and it was really cute and it was great. And we were there for a family event, and there were 4 of us. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to shower first. And I go into the bathroom, and I mean, literally there were no towels.
Oh, no.
And we're like looking everywhere. We're like, well, I guess we're not showering. So to that point, I want to tie that into kind of that reporting. So if something does go sour, I know that rating on Airbnb is super important. So how do you manage that? And if there is a mistake, because I think it's kind of that what I want to say, reciprocity going on with the review and the between the tenant and the host. So talk a little bit about that, and then tie that into ROI on Airbnbs, if you would, in Cleveland after all expenses paid.
So that's a really good question, because, part of what we do, part of the management, and a lot of times when people talk to us about management, they're not thinking about that, thinking about their reviews, but it's kind of like there's 2 ends of it, right? The better the reviews, the better income you're going to get out of it. So we actually start working on our reviews way before the customer even books, right? So as they're booking, as they're going through, we have language in our listing that starts them thinking about the review process. We're always talking about giving them a 5-star experience. So subliminally, they're thinking 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. Most of our Airbnbs, the Wi-Fi code is 5-star Cleveland. So they're putting it in. They're putting it in their phone. They're putting it in their laptop. So we're constantly talking about that 5-star experience. So when you get to your Airbnb and you're thinking 5-star, you better have a towel when you take a shower, so it finishes your 5, and it has to be a good towel. So we're constantly working through that process, and then before they check out, we're letting them know, so it's not a surprise that they're going to leave a review. We say we love to have good reviews. Please let us know anything that you would suggest, and we're asking for their feedback ahead of time. We also tell them that they've been a great guest and we're leaving them a 5-star review. So there's a little reciprocity that way. And that really feeds the Airbnb algorithm, right? It's Airbnb is kind of like Google, right? If you're on the first page, you're probably going to be seen. If you're the first one on the first page, you're most likely going to get clicked. So we want to be the first property on the first page, and that really high, you can get like a 4.97 average review rate. That's awesome. And then the second part of that question is about the average ROI, which that's such a wide gamut. It's really hard to pin it down, because even if you let's think of the short long-term rentals for I deal with different investors. Sometimes if they're looking like between 8 and 12, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes people are looking like between 12 and 14, or maybe even trying to get 15% out of a long-term rental, which is pretty good. But we're typically definitely, I'd say, well over 20% for an average performing asset, right? But you can get into the 30s and even 40% return on investment. So
of course, if you have the power of the Roth, right? So if you're the investor with this model, take out the taxation.
Right. Yeah. If you're getting 20-30% tax free, that's a real good ROI.
And I must mention that you do have a self-directed IRA and you use it, right?
Yes, very much. So
you understand. All right. So I'm going to page down. You guys are doing great. We're going to have our contact information up here shortly, because we definitely want you to reach out to Bernie and Todd with these specific questions, so you can find out, what is the next step for you. Definitely want you to dig into that. Also, if you have my contact information, I'll show that at the end as well. You will get a recording and we will follow up with you. So feel free to schedule with me as well. If there's an IRA portion or question that you have on the business model, we can help you with that as well. So we covered ROI, we covered squatters, we talked about turnkey opportunities. Definitely in Ohio, you're working on that. What would be the cost of an Airbnb rental property in Cleveland in an entertainment district? I think that's kind of a general question. I know that can be seasonal, right? And some of your software will help you with that pricing. But just entertainment area? Do you have a going rate there?
So I'm not sure if that question is asking how much is it per night, or if they're asking if they wanted to buy a home, how much the home would cost to invest in.
Good question. Good clarifying question. I took it as, yeah, I think you're right. I think
So,
it is
so one of the
more-
benefits, let me just address it this way. One of the benefits of investing in Northeast Ohio is we have some of the best rental rates as compared to purchase rates. You can buy a home in Cleveland from anywhere from as low as 20,000, 30,000. If you're buying a value add property that may end up being worth 60, 70, 80,000 on a repair value. Or you can buy properties that are 300, 400,000. If you buy on the lake, you can buy, properties. I'm looking at one with my real estate mentor right now that's right on the lake between Cleveland and Sandusky, and it's about 450,000. But it's right on the lake, so it has great Airbnb potential, and it's halfway between Sandusky and Cleveland, so it's got all those benefits. So if you're talking about purchase price, you're looking at that. Maybe they're asking an entertainment area in Cleveland right now. One of the hottest areas is Ohio City, Tremont. Those are some of the best or hottest Airbnb areas. And if you're looking for properties in those areas, or maybe Lakewood, you're probably looking at 150,000 on the low end to maybe 350, 400 on the high end. And then as far as nightly rates, that's going to vary dramatically as well. Probably anywhere from low hundreds, 115, 120 on the low end, to some of them can see $500, $600, $700 a night. Without going in, I'll tease this a little bit. Actually, I believe it's the highest revenue Airbnb property is in Tremont, Ohio. And if you want to know the details about that, give us a call.
I've heard that number, I think, at a live meeting. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just check here. I think a few more questions. We're doing well. We're almost out of time. So we really appreciate the questions, because this makes it really more interesting, of course, and more relevant. So thank you for taking the time. All of my properties are in HOAs and won't allow short-term rentals. Any suggestions? That's kind of a loaded question, right?
Yeah.
Not much you can do about that unless you can get on the
Yeah.
HOA and change the rules.
Yeah.
Well, the
that's kinda like-
only other thing I would say on that is a lot of HOAs will say 30. They still allow midterm, what we consider midterm rentals. So you do have somewhere in between short and long, and the midterm rental space is growing, and that is 30 days or more. And so a lot of HOAs will allow that, and actually everywhere that is in the United States, they cannot limit you to anything less than that, based on the laws that have to do with Section 8 and some other things I could go into. But outside HOAs, you talked about ordinances and limiting the stays. Nowhere can they limit you outside an HOA to less than 30 days. You can always do a 30-day rental. And those would be considered midterms. So that might be something for someone in an HOA to read carefully. And if it does say 30-day, you could still try to get traveling nurses, military folks of that nature that are looking for 1, 2, 3 month stays that gets you a better revenue source than possibly, year-long leases as an option.
So looking at the verbiage in the documentation from the HOA would be really most important. Are you saying that if there is some verbiage that refers to 30-day, then you could take it a step further? If it doesn't have that verbiage, don't bark up that tree? I don't know.
Well, or go to the HOA meetings, and see what's going on there and see if you can get it changed. It is possible to find out why that's in place, and that sort of thing. And Airbnb is becoming more and more popular. Sometimes these HOAs have been around for so long, this didn't exist, and there was fear around these concepts in the past, but now it's become more understandable to the public. And it may be a tough road to hoe, as they say, but it could be possible to lobby to your HOA to make a change in this regard. And if you do have an ordinance in your local area, sometimes there are ways around that you can go to them and get a permit to allow you to run your property there. And especially if you can sell the idea of the taxes that you're bringing in by doing it. These locations do like the fact that you're bringing people in. There's revenue not only in what they're spending with you, but also going out to dinner and, the other revenue of some tourism that's coming to the area.
Keyword collaboration.
Yes.
Airbnb removed my listing due to below average reviews. Do you have an experience of restoring the listing? I'm going to read a couple more. Okay, actually, most of those are comments. So that question, if you could, and then I have one more for you before we close it out.
So no, I have never restored one that has really low reviews. Obviously we try to keep the reviews up, so that's where we're kind of focusing on. And then sometimes it's my guess, and don't have experience with this. I would just relist it as a new listing. If the reviews are low, it's an average. So pretty much if you're under like 4.4, it almost doesn't even come up on it can still be listed, but if it's under 4.4, it probably won't even show up in the search unless there's literally everything booked for that day.
And I think there's a difference between having your property removed and then you removed, right?
Right.
That's correct.
If you violate the ruls that Airbnb sets, they will remove you. They're pretty strict on that. So
yeah.
And let me touch on that to be more specific. I heard a story about a property owner had a no pets clause, and they, didn't allow pets, and that's completely acceptable. However, a service animal is an exception to a no pets rule. And so if you ever get someone applying and they mention a service animal, be very careful how you handle that, because I know of someone that got removed because they did not allow a service animal and they didn't address it properly. So you do need to follow the rules. And Airbnb is a company that's there to protect themselves, and they don't want to get sued for doing the wrong things. So in addition to that, if they removed you, you could see what any negative reasons were in some of those reviews, make sure you address them, and then contact Airbnb and show them that you've addressed those issues. And they want you up there, because when you're up there and making money, they're making money, but they just want to make sure that you're going to provide a good service. So if you can improve your service and show them that you've done that, they'll help you get relisted.
Excellent. And this isn't related to the midterm rental question. Are there sites specific to midterm rentals? I don't know if I understand sites, Chris.
I don't believe there are, to answer that. So you could still use the short-term rental sites, Airbnb and so forth, but in the rules of your property, then you just list out that your minimum stay, that it has to be 30-day or more.
Okay. I was thinking of sites like construction and versus the website.
Website. Yeah.
All right, great. And I think we have another comment question talking about, I think that long-term rental, great for flight attendants too. We were talking about medical professionals or other.
Sure.
The problem with service animals, it's easy to get that paper from the doctor. So just deal with it, because a lot of people would have service animals. Okay. Proving it, I guess.
I've only ran into maybe 1 or 2 situations with a service animal and in a couple thousand visits, so it's a very small percentage.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah,
good to know.
it's really more a matter
another
of
revenue stream too, right?
It could be, and it's really more a matter of not handling it properly. If you get a request and you handle it properly, Airbnb will work with you. But in the case I'm talking about, they didn't get the information that it had to do with a service animal. They just saw it was an animal and said no, and
Right.
kind of didn't follow up properly.
Right. Well,
Yep.
This has been excellent. I just absolutely love the discussion. I would love to have you again. I know our listeners too. We had so much response on this event. So congratulations to you for bringing a topic to us that is really super important. And I know a lot of people with their IRAs, they want to get real estate in that IRA if they don't already have it in their IRA. And those that have underperforming properties, I definitely think there's needs there. So maybe we can talk next time a little bit more about Ohio, more specifically by cities, looking at Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati. And if you have other experts or other investors you want to bring on, we'd love to hear from them as well. So I really do appreciate everybody joining us. That contact information has been up there, so please jot that down. Of course, it'll be on the recording as well, and you'll get a follow-up email. Also, if you want to schedule an IRA strategy session with me, please do reach out. You can email me directly, give me a call at extension 7003. Feel free to reach out. We'll again follow up, make sure that you get this recording, And if you do have other topics that you want to hear about, we love to hear about that too. So we like to keep it relevant, and we did a great job staying within the hour, guys. So thank you so much. I think we could have gone on for quite a bit longer. So that's why we need to have you back again. So thank you from Valerie and Bertie, Todd, everyone, very informative. Thank you, Igor. We appreciate it. And to all of you that join us on a regular basis, thank you. If you're new to us, please do visit our website, reach out to myself, Bernie, or Todd if you have specific questions about the Airbnb investment model. And of course, if you need some services, they've got them for you to make that conversion possible from your single family to the Airbnb. So again, thank you. And you guys have an absolutely wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, Roberta.
Thanks, Roberta.
Thank you.